All right, guys, welcome back to Fear Not Farm. What I want to show you is a super efficient hack to livestock water. This probably requires some sort of training with your pigs, and I'll tell you why I say that here in just a moment. But we got down to like -2, and the wind chill was probably -15 or so. And the night before that, it got down to what, about 8 degrees. And last night it wasn't much better, maybe 10 degrees. So it's been working phenomenal. With a little bit of sun, it's worked out even better. And that is that we used molasses in our livestock water. And so like on our big livestock tank, if you'll go watch our shorts, I did a pretty comprehensive short video on what I added to the water, and then the day one of the 8 degrees, and then the day two of the negative temperatures, and showed you what happened with our water. And I'll explain why there's ice on top. It's because we've had probably 6 to 10 inches of frozen precipitation. So that ice layer on top isn't so much the water in the livestock tank that's froze, it's the ice and the snow that froze to the top of the water. So it actually worked out almost perfect. But you know, in the case of the stock tank, you know, we could just lightly step on it and we could open up water, and the animals actually seem to drink more with that sugar, which you need them drinking more water when it's cold. Lots of times that water's cold and they just barely lick at it, and then they go on. So you got to break ice constantly to try to keep them in water, or you got to use some sort of a flexible water bowl, so you're having to try to keep hoses thawed or haul buckets of water. And that molasses is an absolute hack. Now I think if you started getting above maybe the Kansas, you know, through Tennessee region, and you started getting further and further north, I think that it may not work out as well. And I want to show you today. It's, what is it, probably 20 degrees right now. So it's got up to 20 today, and it's sunny, and we also used it in our pig waters. Let's go to the little pigs first. Okay, so on our big pigs, we had them on, we haven't been feeding them bulk feed. What we've been doing is feeding a couple of you know, 3 or 4 scoops a couple times a day. So they didn't have constant access to feed during this. So they let their nipple freeze up over here, down here at these pig waters. I mean, it's a pretty universal watering system for pigs. I mean, I think most people understand that. But the nipple was getting cold and freezing. So they were only getting feed a couple times a day, so they weren't constantly going after the water. But yesterday, I think we got a video of it yesterday in the, you know, pretty much the peak of the cold. Yesterday, we found that this group of little pigs over here, these growers, there's 9 of them in here. And we found that when they had constant access to this feed, that they were constantly checking their water. So they had flowing water yesterday because they were putting their warm snouts on that water, and they had flowing water. After 2 days of those temperatures, I can promise you, if that was solid water, that whole thing would be a solid ice cube. We've had less of a drastic temperature drop and had these freeze over solid. So that was phenomenal results for the molasses. And that ratio is 5 gallons of water requires 1 cup of molasses. So I'm super thrilled. What?
I read online it was half a cup per 50 gallons.
Well, I went through it. I mean, you got to think about it like this. It's just sugar. Okay, think about the concentration of sugar in a can of soda pop, right? I mean, I forget how many tablespoons of sugar is in 12 to 16 ounces of Coke, but it's a stupid amount. 1 cup every 5 gallons is still extremely diluted. I read the low numbers and I read the higher concentration numbers, and I thought to myself, let's do the higher concentration. We got two heifer calves and a bunch of goats on it right now, and they're not croaked over. You could see that these animals have absolutely hammered it. You see how deep she's got to go in there to chase the water. It's almost empty. Once again, just a success. I think it was last year was the first time we heard about this.
Yeah, I saw it on, or I saw a short last summer.
I don't know what they was talking about, horse waters or something. Seems like I remember, but I was like, man, that'd be crazy if that worked. So I figured we'd try it out. This was a good opportunity to try it, and this entire, they've drank between 20 goats roughly and a couple young heifers and a couple pasture pigs. They've drinking, 60 gallons here in the last 3 days. Which normally, when we're dragging buckets of water out here, we are struggling to get them to even drink it. We'll bring water out and they take a sip and they walk away and it's frozen. So, 1 cup to 5 gallons. I think if you went half a cup, I think you might be seeing a little more sludge. I could be wrong. Maybe we'll do a test on this in the future, next time our temperatures do this. But, like I said, when they had constant access to feed, they were constantly checking their water to drink. And let's, all of them are free flowing right now, but let's get a close-up of the top of this can. Like I said, this is what you see frozen here on the top is literally the snow that had collected. Driving snow blows in here, settles in here, and freezes to the top of this water. I mean, it feels rock solid. But get down here to this nipple right here. Look at this. We've got free flowing water, and so my thoughts were, I did not think this was going to work in 0 degree temperatures. I thought for sure that nipple would be froze up. There was going to be no chance of getting water out of the nipple. I thought that today, with the rising temperature and the ambient sunlight, I figured the surface of things would get warm enough that we would regain water. So the reason I really put it in here is because I just wanted a preventative of having to try to get the water hose down here and melt the ice with, well water. So the results that I got have far exceeded my expectations. I think that once they kind of learn that they need to keep that nipple warm and constantly be checking it, I think a couple uses of this in cold weather and the application of free choice feed, I think those two things, I think that this is a pretty bulletproof water concept for, Oklahoma anyways, Like I said, if you started getting kind of central northern Kansas and above, down through about Tennessee and, North Carolina, and, you start getting into those northern hemispheres, I think that this might have a little different results, but you'd have to try it to know. Because I would have been very skeptical that I would have gotten this good of results out of it. So I recommend you try it. And if you liked this little short video, please consider liking and subscribing and hitting the bell for notifications. We're going to be doing a lot of land management on this over the next few years. It's not the worst case scenario farm that I've ever seen, walking into and purchasing, but it's in rough shape in probably about 40% of this farm. And I want to try to regeneratively and naturally recover a lot of the land. We're not going to be using, I'm not going to say we're not going to use any fertilizer. We might use some amendments like phosphorus and calcium, but we're not going to be using any nitrogen fertilizers. We're not going to be using any broadleaf pesticides. So if any of that stuff interests you and you want to follow along, just hit that bell and subscribe, and all that's free to you. But if you'll check out our videos, it'll help us continue to put out this content. Thank you.